say, if you didn't get food, please get food. That's sponsored by Skylight, amazing group. John Dye here, you'll hear from him in a little bit. But get your food, get settled in. I'm so thankful to have each of you here today. Let me tell you guys the rules. Don't go past the chairs. I am right here. My name is Brandy Vega. I'm the founder of Promise to Live. It's an initiative put on by Good Deed Revolution. I do this because I almost lost my daughter to suicide almost 3 years ago exactly. And I remember being in the hospital and looking at her lifeless body and praying to God to please save her, telling him that I would do absolutely anything in the world if he would just give me a second chance. And by the way, this was our second chance because she had attempted to end her life 2 years previously. And that time we didn't talk about it because of the stigma and the pain and the shame and the fear and all the things, all the reasons we don't talk about mental health and suicide and addiction and sexual abuse and trauma. So I was praying, God, please save her. For almost 2 days, we didn't know if she was going to live or die. And I finally got the answer that said, Brandy, I'll give you a second chance. There will not be a third. What will you do? This is what I've done in the last 3 years. I took my pain, my skills. Thank you. And by a show of hands, how many people in here have children? So my daughter, who was 12 the first time she tried to end her life, and then 14 the second time, she just turned 17. Thank you. She's an amazing student. She made the honor roll. And we just found out this past week, she's got enough credits to graduate a year early. And so I spent this weekend looking at colleges and dorms, and it was very bittersweet because I'm so thankful to have that. I almost lost that. And I know some of you have lost that. And so as we looked through this, I was thinking, gosh, I'm one of the lucky ones that got a second chance. And that's why I do this every day. I get to see her go to college. She's an incredible artist, amazing. And I'm so thankful for that. I also did an event with the Birds at Breakfast Palooza on Friday, and there were 200 executives there. And we shared our story, and I had so many people come up to me and share that they lost their son, brother, mother-in-law. And I'm here to tell you that suicide is preventable. However, it's a big problem, and it's a big problem we have to talk about and address. And part of it is this. Last year, I was talking to the president of the Fraternal Order of Police. He said, we lost a 7-year-old little boy to suicide. 7. That very same week, my friend's aunt, who was 80, took her life. This is an issue that impacts all of us. Young, old, black, white, rich, poor. Really, I've said it before, it doesn't matter. So thank you guys for being here, because this is how we start conversations, stop the stigma, and save lives, right? Thank you. I want to thank those who've been supportive, and I would like to take just a moment to recognize my team, my advisors, and my particular board. If you're on the Promise to Live team, will you please stand? We've got Michael Batt, Crawford Cragen, Sean Aston, Mike Kazarian, Nate Alders, Tom Telford, Richard Godfrey. You can see that there's some outstanding people here. And my goal has been, thank you guys so much for the work you do. And if you have questions, please reach out to any of them. My goal from day one has been this. When I was looking at my child and not sure if she was going to be around, I didn't care about money. I didn't care about advertising. I didn't care about ego. I didn't know who was getting what grants and funding. All I cared about was that she lived and that we find resources. So my mission here has nothing to do with any of that. My mission here is to create a community of collaboration, to move from awareness, because we all know there's a problem, to action and accountability. And how can we do this as a community? How can we do this as business executives, humans, parents, fathers, church leaders? It falls on all of us. And so before I introduce our panelists and kind of what we're going to be doing today, did everybody get a pocket hug when you walked in? Okay, how many love this? It's kind of a miracle they're actually here today. I had these custom made and they were not supposed to arrive until this evening. And does anything ever get delivered early? No, I would say not. But I got a message that said your package is coming a day early. I was like, thank you. I keep my promise and you send the delivery. But what this is it's a token. It's a coin. And what it says on the back is when times are tough and you don't know what to do, here's a hug from me to you. And it says call or text 988 if you're struggling. And on the front it has Promise to Live. What we have at Promise to Live are resources. And we're going to be expanding our resources with amazing people like this and amazing groups and people like you. So we're building that out. But we do have resources on there now. 988's been out a year and a half, yet only about 18% of people know about it. By a show of hands, you guys are pretty savvy. How many of you did not know about 988? Okay, don't be ashamed. Over 80% of the population don't. 988 is the 911 for mental health. I'm not getting any funding from them, but I don't care about that. I want you guys to know that you have something 24/7, 365 to reach out to if you need help. So we're going to show our speakers. I want to introduce them briefly. Thank you, huge thank you to Clint Betts and the Silicon Slopes team. Fantastic, Dave in the back. Thank you guys so much for doing this. So as I said, I'm the founder of Promise to Live and Vega Media Studios. Our first speaker is going to be Richard Godfrey. He's the founding partner of ABECME. Then we have Cynthia Gamble. She's the Chief Relationship Officer. I'm sure a lot of you know her from Sapria. They're doing amazing work and they've been advocates with us for a while. We have Tom Telford and he is Levo. How do I say it?
Brainstoke and Levo.
Brainstoke and Levo, founder there. And then we have John Dye, who's the executive director at Skylight. And then we have Dr. Dave Morgan, who is the director of mental health and awareness for Silicon Slopes. So I just want to briefly talk to you about what is the power of a promise? How important is a promise and what's the definition? Well, it says, Oxford says a declaration or assurance that one will do a particular thing. I promise God I'd do whatever he asked me to do. A promise is more than a goal. It's more than a wish. A promise is everything. If you've ever had somebody break their promise to you, you know what that feels like. A promise, for me, is about integrity, love, respect, trust, and cooperation. The promise to live, it's not a catchy slogan. It's not something we're trying to get you just to pass on. It's something that we want you to take it to heart because nothing else matters if you're not here. If you can't take it off the table and promise that I'm going to stick around and get the tools, then we have nothing. So we need you guys to make the promise to live. We need you to take that first step and commit to it. So think about that, would you? And then we'll come back on that. I want to turn the time over to my dear friend, Richard Godfrey. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandy. It's my responsibility and my honor today to introduce you to a really basic model we've put together for how we would like to approach working with you in the area of mental health, especially in our organizations. By means of sort of setting the table for this, my wife Heather and I have wonderful children, and we love them dearly. And we're fortunate in that they love us. But that wasn't always the case. My son Jonathan and I both have our own struggles with mental health, always have had. When Jonathan was in his teens, we were very disconnected from each other, but we were looking for a way to, find a way to connect with each other. And we connected over my favorite book, which became his favorite book, which is The Divine Comedy by Dante. I think The Divine Comedy is a great way to start thinking about mental health. Because those of you who know the book, you know that it's divided into 3 sections. It begins in hell. It begins in Inferno. And Dante is having a dream, and in this dream, he finds himself at the gates to hell, at the gates to just overwhelming darkness. And a guide appears for him, the Roman poet Virgil. And Virgil says, we're going to go on this journey to light, but to get to light, we are going to spend some time in darkness. And I don't want you to get lost in that darkness. So stay close to me. Don't get too far away from me. They come to the gates of hell, and Virgil points up and says to Dante, read what's written on that gate. And the gate says, abandon hope, all ye who enter here. This is where Jonathan and I first started to get bound to each other, to connect, was to realize that our shared struggle was the struggle to be hopeful when we were near darkness. And it's that idea that has infused this model that Brandy's allowed us to develop. Dr. Morgan was the person who reminded me that hope needed to surround darkness, or the darkness would just pull us in. So let me show you this very, very simple model. So here's how it works. The center of the model is darkness. It's that place we can all go, whether we want to or not, if we're not very, very careful, and if we become too disconnected from each other. Surrounding that darkness, and therefore creating a barrier to protect us, is hope. And it's really, my experience with mental health is, it's really about preserving hope. And that hope is preserved through connections, through relationships. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. So if the goal is to stay out of darkness, we have to maintain hope. And to maintain hope, this next area represents what we call the promise to live 5 beliefs. One of my favorite quotes says, we see with the mind, not with the eye. In other words, we are governed more by perception than we are by what's actually happening. And when you think of mental health, it's always difficult for us to look at another person who's struggling because we're not looking at it the same way they are. So what's overwhelming them might be nothing to us, and what's overwhelming me might be nothing to them. And so the first place I believe we have to start in staying out of the darkness is in the things that we choose to believe. And we're not suggesting there are only 5 things that maintain hope, but we're suggesting there are at least 5. And we gathered these 5 beliefs around this idea of maintaining hope using a very common construct in psychology and sociology, which is to talk about the 5 aspects of health, right? Physical, mental, social, emotional, and spiritual health. So we have, under Brandy's direction and as a team, identified 5 fundamental beliefs that if we can choose to hold on to, they will maintain hope and they will be the food, the nourishment for the next level of this model, which is what we call the personal activation point. The personal activation point is obviously the point of behavior. So beliefs first, behavior second. In these 5 constructs of physical, mental, social, emotional, and spiritual health, we are going to suggest to you today that you look at the 5 beliefs, you pick one of them that would be beneficial to you or to the people you care about or are responsible for, and then you think about what behaviors could I begin to work on that would support that belief. Because as the belief is nourished, the belief gains strength. And as the belief gains strength, hope increases. And as hope increases, it's just like a giant wall of light that surrounds that darkness and says, just like in Lord of the Rings, you shall not pass. Because really what we have to do is find a way that we can help all of us stay out of the darkness, create a barrier of hope where we don't pass, we don't go into that darkness. And then finally on the outside, you have what Brandy's been doing for the last 3 years. And she always talks about as if she's just doing one thing. Those of us who know Brandy that know that this is about one of 100 things that Brandy does. And she does them all just extremely well. And so she has gathered incredible relationships, resources, tools that we're going to make available to you through what Brandy has put together to assist you in supporting the behaviors, which build the beliefs, which create the strength that feeds the hope that keeps us all out of darkness. And so today, what we're going to do is each one of the speakers is going to present one of these 5 fundamental beliefs that we believe are essential to building the hope that keeps us out of the darkness.
That's pretty exciting, right? Yeah, I'm excited about this, and I really want to thank Richard for being instrumental in helping me put this together, as well as Dr. Dave Morgan, who is the director of mental health here, and he's been a doctor of mental health for 20 plus years. So he really understands this. I'm not claiming to be an expert at anything, but I know how to gather the experts and deliver the content to you in a way that makes sense. So I want to talk to you about why this is important. I kind of broke this down. I'm an Army veteran. I served in the military. I teach self-defense courses. And what I thought might work when we're talking about the mental side is we want you to take suicide off the table as an option. Don't let that be an option. So in a moment of stress, you revert to your lowest form of training. Fight, flight, or freeze. Do you know what you do when you're scared? Have any of you guys ever been scared? Who in here fights? Who runs? And then who freezes like a deer in headlights? What do I do? What do I do? So what we're planning to do today is our brain is designed to respond to the level of training that we have. Chances are some of you have been through things, some of you haven't. But suicide is preventable. And if we train on how to fight out of those dark places ahead of time, then maybe when we get there, we'll have the tools and we'll know what to do. It's just like anything. You're never an expert at something you don't know. And when I teach this, we teach, go back one. I want to talk about the color code of mental awareness. Have any of you heard of that before? Okay, this is my husband in the back. Army, yes. This was actually brought on and trained by Colonel Jeff Cooper, and he taught this in the active war. And he said there's basically 5 colors for mental awareness. And I want to go down those with you and put this into a way for mental health. So the first color is white. White means I'm oblivious, I'm unaware, I don't care, doesn't affect me, la-di-da. There's a lot of people out there who live in white. They just aren't aware. The second color is yellow. Yellow means I'm aware, I'm alert, I'm educated, I have an idea, it's in my mind. I'm not hyper alert, I'm not overreacting, but it's there. Every one of you guys today are in yellow. You are here because you're aware that mental health is important, and you want to either get help, tools, or be a solution. Orange is I'm making a plan. Okay, so whether it's for you, you might not have an issue. Maybe it's for somebody you love, maybe it's your children, maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's your team. Orange is a plan. This is where we learn how to cope. We learn for the signs to look for. We're saying, okay, if I ever get to this point, I would have a safety plan, which might include 988, call my mom, go for a run, do spiritual things. I mean, that's part of what we're talking about. So orange is we're getting educated, we're making a plan, we're preparing. Red is the fire. Red is I'm in the moment, and I have to use what I know. I have to use the plan. Black is very bad. Black is that darkness. It's that hole. You never want to go there. When I teach this the other times, we're talking about you're sitting at the stoplight, you're in your car, and if you're on your phone or you're listening to your music, what condition would you be in? White. That's the color code white. You're oblivious, you're unaware. Now, if you're sitting there and somebody comes flying up behind you and they slam into the back of your car, you would go where? Straight to black. You never saw it coming. You don't know where it was. People say all the time, I don't know, I don't even remember what happened. Like I blacked out. I don't know, I can't recall, because your brain is so overwhelmed it can't process the feelings and the emotions and what you're going through. Black is bad. It's death, it's danger, it's a place we don't ever want to get to. And chances are you won't get there if you are aware all the time, if you have a plan, and if you know how to fight the fire in red. So these will be some of the things we talk about when we talk about, okay, take it off the table. Don't let it be an option. You know, and this doesn't apply, and this isn't probably doctor tested, but we all have our things that we're willing to do, our line in the sand. What will you do for you or someone you love? if we lose our job and we're struggling for money, we don't think robbing a bank is an option, right? I mean, most of us would say that's not an option. But when we're struggling with mental health, why do we have suicide as an option? We have to remove that as an option. Once we remove that and say, okay, it's no longer on the table, I'm going to stay in yellow, I'm going to go to orange. And again, whether it's for you or someone you love, you know how to process it. And when you process it accordingly, my daughter, we sat in the car and I was crying because she's going to be going off to college. And I said, Kai, how are you doing? I'm doing really good, Mom. No, really, how are you doing? I'm so excited for college. I'm so happy. I said, what would you do if you weren't? Well, I'd talk to you. Do you promise you would talk to me? I promise I would talk to you. Having that conversation when we don't care about ourselves enough or love ourselves enough to make a promise matters with other people. Having the color code of mental awareness to know where you are and then how to get through it, getting the tools, getting the education, making the plan, so that you can fight the fire. Those are the extinguishers. We want you to have tools, so when you get in the heat and you're like, this is hot and this burns, we go, okay, the extinguisher's right over here. The fire blanket's right over here. Help is right over here. That's what we look for. So this is a part on mental. We will dive into this deeper as we move forward, and I want to turn the time now over to Cynthia, who's going to talk about physical. Oh, wait, I have my last quote. It's really good. Wait, bring it up. I forgot. It ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. So my husband said I had to use that one. So I wanted to make sure I gave him my word. I wanted to keep it. But I think this is the key. We all get knocked down. Life is hard. No matter who you are, even as glamorous as it looks, life is hard. Doesn't matter how hard you hit. Doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down. It matters that you're here, that you keep getting back up, that you keep nourishing your body and your mind and your soul and figuring out how you can keep getting through it. So thank you for that. Now, Cynthia, I'm so sorry.
Got it. Thank you, Brandy. I don't have a cold or COVID for that matter. She just makes me cry all the time. From a mother to a mother. I have 4 sons. None of them attempted suicide, but I know several, including you, Brandy. What you're doing is working. Look at this. It's a beautiful sight. So thank you for being here. On behalf of Brandy and her amazing team, thank you. I tend to be long-winded. I'm Latin. I talk a lot, so I made some notes because she's just giving me 5 minutes, you guys. I can't do much from 5 minutes. 4 or 5 minutes. 4 minutes? Okay, 4 minutes. Okay, I can do this if I can stick to this. But anyway, I should say I'm Cynthia Gamble with Sapria. Our space is child sexual abuse. Now, think about that for a second while I use my 5 minutes. Childhood trauma. The repercussions of a child that was sexually abused will linger throughout all of his or her life. Imagine living in that state of fight, flight, or freeze several times a day, every day. When your body, you just have no control of your body, of your emotions, of your movements even, as severe as it is. The body keeps score. The brain is very interesting. It is on our side, right? Because those emotions the brain tells us, hey, there's something here, like you were talking about, right? There's something here. Except that if a survivor of child sexual abuse sees somebody that talks, walks, or speaks like the perpetrator, all those emotions are going to come back as if the abuse is happening right now, although it may have happened 30 years ago. Can you imagine living that type of life every day? It's PTSD. You Army people know that feeling very well. It is devastating, it's debilitating. And we talk a lot about the symptoms of that child sexual abuse, and they are manifested through addiction, sleeping, eating disorders, multiple personalities, and yes, suicide ideation. I've been with a team at Sapria for over 7 years now. Prior to that, corporate America, for-profit, hire and fire employees and family members or whatever, and I just used to be a lot more judgmental. I have changed my ways. I don't judge anymore. I don't judge, and I hope that you don't either. If an employee is behaving a certain way, or if a family member is making certain choices that are not conducive to what you think it is the right thing to do, stop and think. Stop and think. Why? What is the root cause of that behavior? Child sexual abuse or any child abuse, could be neglect, physical abuse, are very determinant of what the lifetime of trying to heal for what happened to this. But there is hope. And that's the beauty of why we're here, Brandy and team and everybody else. There is hope. Sapria exists to liberate individuals and society from child sexual abuse and all of its lasting impacts. We do it by way of holding a retreat, 32 weeks a year, where women come from all over the country, some parts of the world. They spend 4.5 days with us. We teach them different techniques, different ways that they can cope and react to all those triggers that they sometimes receive almost on a daily basis. At the end of the day, we need to take care of our bodies. We need to take care of our mental illness. Many of the physiological issues that we deal with in our physical bodies, the root cause of that has to do with some sort of trauma that we're not able to cope with. The body reacts in interesting ways. So we have a problem. But the beauty of this is that you're here to solve it. Sapria wants to be part, keeps making me cry. Sapria wants to be part of this process. Because although our services are very niche, these are adult women that were sexually abused in their childhood, and for the most part, they never done anything about their healing. 18 or younger, they were sexually abused. So they come to us, and we give them the tools, not only during those 4.5 days, but beyond. And we're trying to be part of the solution of a problem that is getting out of control. The women that come to a retreat feel liberated because our program is heavy on education, experiential, educational. We create a sense of community. On Monday, when the women come to our retreat, they don't know each other. By Thursday, they are very, very close. Because why? Not because they spend every single minute together for 4.5 days. That's not enough to create those deep bonds. It's because they have that in common. So help us spread the word. You're here. Promise me that you will go home and you may not know it, but you do know somebody that was sexually abused. 1 in every 5 of our children, 1 in every 7 of our children have been sexually abused. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many of you? Don't want to know. The women that come to a retreat have said, imagine this. You have not only changed my life, but you have saved it. Thank you.
It's an honor to be here with you today. I'm gonna have to move. I can't stand still. I'll fall over. So, right here? Okay. Thank you. Boundaries is what I need. My name is Tom Telford. I am with a team of people here today from Brainstoke. We are a media mental health company. We produce a podcast telling people's stories of struggle in Stoke with the intent to do just this, to create awareness and hope among all of us. I'm also an owner and founder of another company called Aspire Medical, which on February 1st will be known as Levo. We're rebranding. There are a couple women who are here today. Amanda, will you just raise your hand? And Megan, these are two women who are actually on the front lines of the mental health space. So Levo employs mental health professionals. They do incredible work. Those of you that are mental health professionals in the audience today, would you just raise your hand, who work with people? Thank you for what you do. You need to be recognized. This is a significant industry who carries weight that I can't fathom. I'm married to a marriage and family therapist. I get the work free. She's an amazing woman, and that has led our lives into the mental health space. I spent 20 years in institutional finance. I built companies, and this is relatively foreign to me to be in this space the last 5 years, but I have my own story. So I want to part of the education process is vulnerability, and in my opinion, when kids, our children, your children, when they start to hear us as adults be vulnerable, instead of just telling them what they're not doing right, but when they know that we don't get it right, that we are human. I struggle with the term plan of happiness, I'll be honest. It should be plan of humanness. We're all just human, right? And when children know that we're human and that we struggle, things change. So my story begins as a young elementary student. I was the kid in school who was slow. And the worst day of my week was when I showed up to school knowing that it was tutor day. And I was mortified of hearing this in my classroom. Tommy, your tutor's at the door. And it would be announced very loudly across all of my classmates. I was that kid. I struggled to learn how to read. I couldn't learn. I had a learning disability. Unbeknownst to, I didn't know what it was called. My mom loved me. She's like, hey, you got to meet with someone special. And I'm like, well, it's embarrassing when they call me out of class. But that's how I was in school. I coped with the stress of being a struggling student all growing up, but I coped with it, key word here, coping, by skiing. The fact that we're at the slopes today, I love. The slopes are part of my mental health story for sure. I coped by ski racing. My parents put me on skis, and I immediately found independence and freedom in my mind that I could never have at school. I definitely didn't have it in church. I just found freedom. It helped me cope with life stress, which is part of what Brainstoke is all about, the 5 S's. Get serotonin in your brain, and things are just going to have a different capability to cope. So I ski raced. I loved it. It was my passion. At 13 years old, I was ski racing in a downhill race, going too fast, likely, for the age, and I crashed, and I destroyed my knee. And as I laid in the snow, waiting for the ski patrol to bring the boggin to me, I knew my identity just like that changed. All of my friends, all of my family knew me as the ski racer. I skied 4 days a week. I got out of class constantly for ski races. And in an instant, all of that identity was changed. So now between school and ski racing being taken away, I immediately had experienced at 13 what I would consider embarrassment and disappointment that stuck with me for years and years. I coped with that disappointment of not being able to ski race the same anymore. I was still so competitive. I was so driven that I wanted to be out there doing stuff. I love sports. All I really wanted to do was spend time with my best friends. As you all know, teens just want to be with their friends. I did that by playing baseball and football. Well, my senior year, I was playing as a defensive back for my high school, and we played for our homecoming game the Skyline Eagles. And the quarterback of the Skyline Eagles that night was Brandon Doman. I don't know Brandon. Yep. Some of you do. Brandon's an amazing athlete. He played quarterback. He went on to play at BYU. He coached at BYU. Well, that night, Brandon threw a pass, 65-yard bomb, over my hands as the defensive back into his receiver's hands, who scored. Right? Disappointment. I leave the field. I go to the sideline. And as I stood there on the sideline, I glanced over at my coach. We made eye contact. I don't remember how long it really was, but in about 5 seconds, he destroyed, I'll be honest, my self-worth. I was so ashamed in front of a huge crowd as a student athlete like I had never experienced. So at 17 years old, right, embarrassment, disappointment, and shame. 3 big ones, for a teen. I didn't even know what to do with those emotions, I'll be honest. That was the first time in my life that my own feelings and emotions scared me. My thoughts scared me. And they were thoughts of harm. I didn't know how I was going to face my best friends, my coaches. It was rough, to say the least. I carried that look from my coach into my 20s, right? How's that possible? How can you carry, a moment like that for so long? And the answer is trauma, right? Cynthia knows this. The therapists, those professionals in here know what can actually go with you. Here's what's interesting about my story. When I was, in July of 2015, I sat down at my desk, home office, and I typed into my laptop my brokerage account password. I was looking on my account to recognize that day, to a degree, the highest I've ever felt in my life. I had been building a company for a number of years, and on that day, that point, I was recognizing selling a company. I was having an exit moment. And as I sat there at my desk, totally overwhelmed with emotion, I thought to myself, how did I get here? How did someone who sucks at school, tons of disappointment, can't learn, 17 on the ACT, that was awesome, by the way, for me. How in the world did I get here? And I sat there and I wrote for hours. And there were 3 highlight moments that got me there. They are these 3. So how can shame, disappointment, and I don't even know what the other one right now, I can't even think, but shame, disappointment, and embarrassment, right? Huge one. Why those? So when we meet as, a business, a company, as we meet with our mental health professionals, we are not trying to take away emotion, right? We're trying to learn to cope with it. And here's how I learned to cope with it. 3 things. The spectrum of coping. Oh, you can go back. Yeah, I want to just comment on the 3 words at the top right there. Recognize, categorize, and operationalize. What I started to realize in my late 20s is that sometimes negative emotion is the exact catalyst that drives us forward. I can tell you that day in July of 2015, that one moment with my coach drove me through so many walls as an entrepreneur, I can't even tell you, right? Even though that was negative in that moment with him, it was the compelling force to get me to just drive forward. Now, I'm not saying it was right or wrong, it just was. I actually ended up writing a letter to that coach, trying to rid myself of some of the heavy weight and burden that I had with him. He wrote me a letter back, and I'll be honest, it wasn't awesome, right? But the fact that I wrote him and that he wrote me, it was a moment of grace. I was trying to find grace to rid myself and unload the burden of those emotions that I had. And the fact that he wrote me back, there was a moment like, really, dude? That's all you're going to say now? Like all these years later, that's all you got for me? And then this hit me. He was the coach of the team who also lost that night. His employment, his family, his embarrassment, right? I had to grant grace to him. I don't know what really happened. Was he really that big of a jerk? Probably not. Did he have expectations? Yes. So grace for ourselves and others frees us. It helps us move past. Here are the tools that allowed me to do that, I believe. Number one, next slide, the spectrum of coping. There is no just black or white, right or wrong. We may have skipped it, that's okay. Spectrum of coping. The other one is fitting in versus belonging. Some of you know who Dr. Jennifer Finlayson Fife is. This woman's amazing. She's an LDS sex therapist, that's how she's known. But her work in the mental health space on fitting in versus belonging and self-authorship is lights out. I wish every teen knew the difference between fitting in and belonging. Belonging is owning yourself, self-authoring. My mental health changed when I started to understand this. The reason that social media is brutal is because teens are trying to fit in, they're not trying to belong to themselves. I think this is such a critical point. The last one is the window of tolerance. This was enormous for me. Understanding and pushing our ability to tolerate big emotions, knowing what to do with them so they just don't take us over. That's tough for teens, right? In so many ways, that is so challenging to try to tolerate big emotions. A brilliant woman said one time by the name of Maya Angelou, always do your best. And when you know better, do better. This is what this is about. I love Promise to Live. I love what Brandy is doing. By the way, Brandy was on Brainstoke, so there's a great podcast episode coming out. Her story's legit. I love it. It's so cool that she's leading this charge. We are here to learn to know better. And I love that Brandy's focused on now what? And the answer is go and do better. Go spread this. The knowledge and the education is key. Teaching, everybody needs to know these tools, but especially youth. I don't know how, but somehow we got to figure out better curriculum in schools for kids to know better, to know these tools at a very young age. Now, I know that there are companies who are doing that, and it's awesome. I've heard a little bit about that. That's an awesome effort. Next slide, I'll just comment on this. As companies, we focus on these 5. When we sit with hundreds of therapists who are part of the organizations I've been involved in, and we talk to them, these are the 5 areas that we focus on. There are intersections that are at the mental health. These are adults and people who sit at these areas of life, and they're critical. Every parent needs better tools. They're the coaches in the home of mental health. But just as important, my own child, okay? His mental health was directly correlated in getting better help from his school teacher, okay? School teachers are the best mental health clinicians, and they're not paid to do it, okay? We're gonna invest heavily in education at our companies because these men and women who teach school, they see it better than parents. I'm just telling you, they do. They see the child under stress, interacting with their peers, and they can identify. Here's the challenge. They can't say much because of the laws and rules and regulations of teachers. They need help, and our goal is to try to help them. Thank you all. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Incredible stuff. Thank you. So inspired by all these people, their efforts, their stories. My name is John Dye. I'm the executive director of Skylight. We have an initiative under a nonprofit called the Radiant Foundation. And specifically, our goal is to help youth of the world deal with many of the things that they face. If we go to the next slide, we know that they're hurting, right? We look at these headlines. Go ahead and just drop through these. Why are millennials and Gen Z the loneliest generations? They're the tired generations, right? We have sleep issues. More than 90% of Generation Z is stressed out. They're dealing with stress. We've been more empowered than ever. Why are Gen Z the least confident generation? Self-esteem issues plague them. And finally, millennials and Gen Z are more anxious than previous generations. And people are trying to figure out why. Why are they so anxious? So we have many things that are plaguing this rising generation, these youth that we interact with on a daily basis. And so Skylight, our goal is to really help them from this perspective. Now, there are many options and opportunities for people to approach these mental health maladies that people are facing. We think, somewhat of a unique approach. We believe that spiritual wellness has to be addressed. Earlier we addressed this was one of the 5, and sometimes this is overlooked or it's not given the proper weight that we think it deserves. A connection with a higher power, we believe, is key and critical to solving this. And when we say higher power, we're not being prescriptive with that. You know, many in this room would use the word God, others might use Allah, others Shaddai, others terms that I'm probably not even aware of, the universe, the creator, etc. But our mission is to help the youth of the world to live happier lives through creating a connection. And so what I want to give you today and what I want to talk to you about, number 1, is adding a tool to your toolkit. It's free of charge, so hopefully that perked up some ears. We are part of a nonprofit foundation. We have people who are very generous, and they believe in the mission, why we're all here today. And so we want to talk a little bit more about that today. So Skylight, when we talk about Skylight, how do we impact hundreds of millions of youth worldwide? Well, we've just started 2.5 years ago, so we're over 6 million people that we've impacted, hopefully in a positive way. But we believe that same device that each of us has in our pocket is key and critical to making a difference with the youth of the world. It seems counterintuitive a little bit, doesn't it? The very device that creates a lot of the competition and the FOMO that the youth of the world feel is also an antidote to those very same things that they're feeling, if it's used correctly. We know that, right? Things can be used correctly and incorrectly all the time. So we have created an app, a native iOS app, an Android app, and also a web app. You can go to skylight.org and see the web app or search for Skylight Spiritual Wellness in the App Store, and you'll be able to pick that up. But again, over 6 million users and counting. It's key, I think, to realize this too. When you get to the app, you will see that as we create emotional resilience in people, you can do big things or you can do small daily things that actually add to that resilience. So as we're talking about some of these big mental experiences, mental breaks or unfortunate incidences, when we talk about suicide and suicidal ideation, the key is to help people regulate those emotions, not get rid of those emotions, but regulate those emotions and be able to understand how to best channel that and deal with those emotions. So specifically when we look at this, we have worked with the former Chief Science Officer at Calm. Many of you are familiar with Calm, the app, to figure out what are the key things that we need to focus on. We started with over 40 subjects dealing with Gen Zennials, right? Gen Z and younger millennials. So dealing with them, we started with 40 topics, and these are the 5 that we saw that had the most impact for good on the youth. So number 1 is sleep, 2 is anxiety, 3 is stress, 4 is loneliness, and 5 is self-esteem. Many of those things we saw in those headlines on that first slide. So as we deal with these, the question is, how do we best help the youth of the world? Well, we create, through Skylight, exercises. We call them exercises, 3 to 5 minutes. The majority of them are in length, but bite-sized things that people can do, a morning routine, a night routine during the day that will help them actually be able to assimilate some of these emotions they're feeling and connect with a higher power. And what we've seen in the past 2.5 years, again, working with this Chief Science Officer at Calm and doing research, we have found out that it is working. We have those that utilize the Skylight app experience lower anxiety, reduced stress, and better sleep. Again, the key is to utilize these. It doesn't take a lot of time every day, but it does take use. Actually, it doesn't even need to be daily. It needs to be on a regular basis, but when you have an opportunity to do that, you will see a much lower score in each of these, which is good. You'll notice one guy here, actually we have Henry Amar. He's one of our contributors. So raise your hand, Henry. His picture's up here. Good old Henry. All right. All right, next slide. But who better to talk about what happens when you utilize Skylight than a few participants? I've got 2 quotes I want to just share really quick. This is, again, we anonymized the names. A female participant, 835, said this: I pay for Calm, I pay for Finch, I pay for therapy, I pay for mental health medication. That's like a lot. There are so many other bills I already pay. If I had found this app sooner than any of the rest of that, I probably wouldn't have needed the other apps. Now, I'm not here to say you don't need any other apps. I am here to say we are free. We want to get the word out. We do need money, but more than anything, since we are a nonprofit, we need impact. We need influence. We need people to share the good word. So again, skylight.org. Our second testimonial here. I like how it doesn't focus on a specific deity type thing, how it can be applied to any way, shape, or religion that you are. It can even apply to anywhere, because mine is kind of fluid. Sometimes it tends to kind of change depending on my circumstances or what I believe. So one of the key things that was brought up earlier, one of our biggest coaches, is civic or religious groups, right? And as people are trying to find their own way through faith, that is fluid. And so it's important, really, I think, to be able to not be prescriptive in how you approach these things, but more descriptive and be there for the people in their time of need. So that's key. Okay, so I'll end here. QR code to download it. But again, I will just reemphasize one thing. We are part of a nonprofit. Again, free of charge. We want to put more tools in your toolboxes. So when you are thinking of things to do from a mental health perspective to help people at your company, to help youth in your congregations, to help others in your neighborhood, or even your own family, please consider Skylight. Again, the value is there if you use it. It will help you deal with many of these things. And resilience, I know it's a word that sometimes is overused, but it's something that if you do on a regular, consistent basis will make a big difference. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm back. I'm going to talk about how quality connections support mental health. The greatest blessing in my life is my wife, Heather. We've been married for 44 years. She has known me since we started dating under the radar at the age of 13. So you know which culture I'm part of. We married 3 days after I returned from my LDS mission. We have broken all the rules all the time and have had a wonderful life together. So in 2020, when I came to her and I said, I'm going to quit my job, I'm going to just get rid of everything, she knew that this was just another of my crazy phases. And so she said, well, now what are you planning to do? And I said, I cannot take the level of contention in the world. It's everywhere. It's in our families, it's in our neighborhoods, it's in our nation, it's in the world. I have to do something about it. And because she knows me well, she immediately said, well, what would qualify you to tell anyone about how to manage contention? And so I went to bed. And I thought about it for a few days, and then I got my answer. I said, Heather, you and I are actually experts in the ability of connection to not only reduce contention, but to improve individual and collective mental health. And she said, how are we experts? Neither of us has a doctorate. This is not where we've spent our lives. I said, we have traveled to every continent on this planet and to scores, I have to count again, but nearly 100, if not 100 countries. She said, yeah, and we have seen people everywhere, of every type, connecting in even the most difficult and challenging circumstances. We just need to tell their stories. And so that's what we did. We sat down and I said, let's take 28 stories from 7 continents and address the power of connection to cure contention and improve mental health. Next slide, please. We have someone from Deseret News here today. I met her earlier. And we were talking, I said, well, my second slide is going to be from Deseret News because it was just on the 14th that I read this particular article about the wait lists that exist in our state with all the good that we do for people to get access mental health support. It was interesting that also this week, Deseret News rolled out a whole series of articles that deal with the idea of connection, starting with an article by our governor. And so, knowing that I was going to speak here today, I said, well, this is a perfect fit because connection does lower contention and it does give us tools to address mental health. And here's how. Next slide, please. Here's a quick story from a trip I made a number of years ago to Cape Town. So I'm in Cape Town, South Africa. It's a business day. I'm walking down the street, just lunchtime. Ahead of me are a group of young professionals. And I can overhear their conversation. I'm not intentionally eavesdropping, but it's a really good conversation. And they're young professionals, and they're talking about success and wealth and their aspirations and goals in life. And some of them are talking about, how if I could just fill in the blank, own this car, live in this house, do this, I would be happy. And so it was very much a conversation about trying to connect wealth to happiness and health. And I have no problem with that whatsoever. But in that conversation, and this is the first story in the book, I heard a young woman, probably in her early to mid-20s, say one of the most powerful and wise things I have ever heard in life. She said to her friends, "Will money hold your hand when you are old?" Will money hold your hand when you are old? A lot of things matter in life, but ultimately nothing matters more than connections. Next slide, please. A life preserver cannot save a life unless someone throws it and someone catches it. I didn't always look like this. There was a time when I was very athletic, and I was a lifeguard all through high school and college, and so I had to use life preservers on occasion. And really, it required a connection. Not only did I have to recognize that a person was in stress, get that life preserver and get it out to them, but they had to grab onto it. You see, all the tools in the world, all the ideas in the world, all the medicine in the world, all the science in the world doesn't matter until there's a connection, until there's someone who takes that tool and reaches out and someone reaches back to take a hold of it. It ultimately, in my mind, rests in this idea of connection. Next slide, please. We identified in this approach to connection and contention a very simple idea called the width space. And the width space is simply this. You and I are very, very different. But fundamentally, we're all human beings. And there is something we can connect over. Even if it's just that we're human beings. Sometimes we have a very large connection with people, a lot of what we call width space overlap. Sometimes we struggle to find any, but I believe this, there is always a width space, always a tiny but powerful opportunity to connect. And when we make that commitment to connect, then we have to make the commitment to sustain the connection. And for that, we have what we call the behaviors. If you want to connect with another human being, try these 4 things. First of all, be curious. This is the behavior we call talk with, not talk at. I grew up, I'm clearly not a Xennial. I grew up in an environment where people used to tell me, listen, if you need an opinion, I'll give you one. I'm not opposed to talk at, but I think we overuse it. Talk with is the connection tool driven by sincere curiosity. I really want to know about you. I really want to understand why you believe what you believe, why you don't see the world the way I see it. Be available is the tool we call work with. In our organizations, to get efficiency, we do a lot of work on, which means either remotely or directly, I give you work, and I say, please work on this, and then I move on to something else. And yet we know things like mentoring and coaching and supporting are essential to our mental health, which means we're going to have to do a little bit less, in my opinion, of work on and a little bit more of work with, which means a little less efficiency, a little more time with me, a little more helping me, a little more mentoring me, a little more trying to understand me. Be imaginative. This is the skill we call build with rather than build for. Many of us here have built organizations, very successful organizations, based on our vision. Build with says, join my vision and help me make it better. Help me take the things that I am so passionate about, that I am launching here, but connect to me, help me make it better. And then finally, be linked. I have lots of bad habits. I have a very bad habit in that I have a much longer stride than my wife, and so I tend to get ahead of her when we're walking down the street, which she finds very offensive, and she should. So then I try to slow down, and then she thinks I'm making fun of her, and so this becomes contentious. And then she reminds me that there's a very simple way not to get disconnected from each other, and that is, in this case, to literally hold hands. Be linked is the walk with commitment. It says, whether metaphorically or literally, I am never going to get too far ahead of you, and I'm never going to get too far behind you. Talk with, work with, build with, and walk with are skills that create connection. Connection lowers contention. Contention is destructive to mental health. Contention feeds suicidal ideation. I've decided to spend the rest of my life just telling stories of the people I've met in this world. We have problems in this world. We have problems in this country. We have problems in this community. We have problems in my church. But those problems are not nearly as powerful as the goodness of people. Heather and I have literally met thousands of people all over the world. We just came back from India. And there's just goodness everywhere. And we need to unleash it, and we unleash it by connecting to it. Final slide, please. So here are the ones: talk with, build with, walk with, work with. Next one. This is our newest granddaughter. You know what? You can never have a bad enough day that you can't look at that picture and realize it's going to be fine. Thank you.
So once upon a time, there were 4 people who were walking in an African savanna, and all of a sudden sensed the presence of something that they'd never understood before. And so as they walked to get closer to it, each of them, and these were blind people, each of them found a different place. And one of them felt the tail and said, this must be a snake. This beast that we're in front of must be very much like a snake. And then another person felt the giant leg of the beast and said, well, this beast is a lot like a tree. And then another one felt the side, felt the height of it, and said, well, this beast is more like a wall. Another one felt the trunk and said, well, this beast is more like a snake. And they were all right, but at the same time, they were all incorrect, because they only saw part of what was there instead of seeing everything together. And Brandy's asked me to kind of pull everything together that we've talked about today, and I thought that was a great metaphor for that, because oftentimes we do just see things in part. I'm Dr. David Morgan. I'm a licensed psychologist. I have a PhD in counseling psychology from BYU, and I've been a psychologist since 2002, and I'm the director of mental health awareness for Silicon Slopes. And so our mission is to increase awareness in the business sector regarding mental health, because people aren't leaving their mental health issues at home. When they clock in at 8 o'clock and then pick them back up as they leave business at the end of the day is something that we need to talk about, we need to figure out. So this is a mobile. I used to have one of those hanging in my crib, not that one, although I'm old enough to that it's probably made out of metal back then. And what I love about these is that they're separate, but they're all connected as well. And so if you can cycle through those slides, those are the things that we've talked about today. We talked about mental, physical, social, emotional, and spiritual. And the good news about this is that when you make a change to one of those things, it necessarily affects the whole system. People come and they say, well, there's not much I can do. There's not much I can do to help someone regarding their mental health. But anything you do to help them with their mental health is going to change something. And that system is going to look different. It's the good news is it's not necessarily, our brains aren't like that. If you change your brain, it will actually change into a different shape. It'll be a different mobile later if you change it enough. But you give it one tug and it'll shake for a while. It'll go back to its the state that it needs to be. One of the things that I think is important to understand with mental health, and the thing that it's kind of a pet peeve, is when we oversimplify complex constructs. And mental health, what we know more and more is that it's very complex. There are no simple answers to mental health. And that's okay, because we have all these things. And so if you have someone that's struggling with suicidal behavior and you're trying to help them, and maybe spiritual isn't their thing, but they love to run, physical is their thing, well, they can start there. And that's going to have an effect on the system. And maybe they're not a runner, but they love to connect with someone emotionally. So that's where they start, and they go to therapy. And that helps them. Anything that can be done is a good place to start with that. Go to the next slide, please. So at Silicon Slopes, one of the goals is to empower individuals and groups to learn, connect, and serve. And that's the point of these town halls. We're going to continue to have them. We're going to be starting a podcast fairly soon that I'll be hosting, where we'll talk with business leaders and other people about mental health in the workspace, just to continue this conversation. The first mental health town hall that was held by Clint Betts back in August, one of the participants said, he said, this is great. He says, but we need to continue the conversation. And that's when I got involved, because I said, well, someone needs to carry the torch, right? Someone needs to say, okay, who's going to keep talking about this? Because things happen in our lives, and they become very important for a moment, and then other things happen because we're busy. And then those things kind of lose their importance. And unless someone says, we're going to continue this conversation, then sometimes those things can get lost. And mental health is too important to get lost over time. If you go to the next slide, please. So this is one of the questions that I often ask when I teach. I say, based on what I learned today, what am I going to do differently in my life? And that's something that I want you all to consider. We should have had this question up there at the beginning so you could have been paying attention and thought about that. Some of you, at least everyone's probably full, right, if you had something to eat. And some of you may have been inspired, and some of you may have thought, man, I'm going to go change the world because of something I learned today. If you don't do anything about it, then nothing's going to happen. You have to act. And my encouragement to you is that whatever you do to act, make it small. If you feel like you want to change the world, please don't try that tomorrow, because it's not going to work. You're going to fail. You can't. You can't make that much change in that little time, but you can do one thing consistently over time that's going to make a difference in your life, and it's going to make a difference in the lives of people that you love. And that thing is different for everyone. That's what I love about that mobile example. Wherever you tug on there, it's going to change. But you have to be the people to make the change. The fact that you're here, that you came, is evidence that you're interested in this. And so that's my invitation to you. Just choose one thing, preferably small, and say, I'm going to start doing this differently. I'm going to reach out to people differently, or I'm going, whatever it is. And the cumulative effect of that is going to be amazing. I love the example. We just moved to Utah a year ago. We lived here, obviously, when I was doing my education, but we lived in Washington State for 25 years. And in front of our house, there was a huge tree that it was an apocalypse every fall when the leaves fell off it. And our kids would just rake leaves for days and days and days. One time they blew down into I'm digressing, they blew down to the neighbor's yard, and she was very mad. And so she comes driving by with my wife, with our 6 young children out there raking, and she rolls down her window, she says, sometimes your leaves blow down into my yard. And some of the older ones staged a protest, and they went down into her cul-de-sac and had signs that said, leave us alone, and those sorts of things. We have clever children. They're older now. They're still clever. But one of the pieces of sidewalk had raised up about 4 inches, and it created a gap in front of theirs, and it was from the roots from that tree. when that root started, it was tiny. It was a thread. You know, like when you go to pull a weed, right? You get the weeds soon, because if you wait till they're 6 months old, you need a backhoe to pull it out of the ground. You could just pluck that out, but that root over time grew to be so powerful that it lifted that concrete out of the ground. Slowly, slowly, over the course of decades. And that's the kind of change I'm talking about. Just those little things that you can do have that kind of power ultimately, but you have to be consistent in it. That's what I really appreciate about that. So that's my invitation. Like I said, we're going to continue to do these things, these town halls. The next few are going to focus on Brandy's initiative. After that, we're going to get into some more mental health things, depression, anxiety, all the things that we need to talk about to really help you, and we hope you can come back to there. Thank you so much for coming today.
Well, thank you guys so much. Thank you to our panelists. What we're going to do right now is turn it over to some Q&A. So I've got an extra microphone up here. If you have a question, just raise your hand. I'll give you the mic. And then our expert panel is happy to answer these. We have about 10 or 15 minutes. Does anyone have a question? Not all at once. Okay. Let me leave you one here. Okay.
Thank you. I'm Mario from Praxis. I'm a chaplain, and what we do is support people from the spiritual part. But my question is, I know from the Anglo part, it's very heavy with mental health issues. So you're doing great, fantastic, but turn around to the Hispanic community. We need you from our point of view. If you say think like your lack of resources, we're worse. So but we're working on it. Like you say, little by little, step by step. Please turn on to the Hispanic community.
Thank you for that. Yes.
At Sapria, we do hold Spanish retreats for Spanish-speaking women, both in person, and we have a new initiative to do an online course as well.
And
So,
we
yeah.
also have Promesa para Vivir, Promise to Live in Spanish for our Latino community. But I would encourage all of you, we're open to collaboration. That's the name of the game here. If you've got resources that you want to share with us, please come and I probably butchered the way I said that, but please come and team up with us and let us know, because we need help and we know it takes a community. Next question.
I think there's a comment.
Oh, I was just going to briefly mention, Mario and I spoke earlier, but yeah, I do believe that there's a dearth of Hispanic and Spanish, and quite honestly, other languages and ethnicities, right? We're doing something about that. Mid-year we'll have some things, but I think, thank you for bringing that point up, because sometimes we don't see that full picture, so thank you for mentioning that.
Okay, thank you. Next question.
Yeah, so my name's Kate. I'm a consultant and speaker, and something about mental health and this opportunity that's really exciting for me is that when people are mentally well, it's really good for business, right? Because when people are well mentally and they're excited to work and they're not burned out and they're not anxious and depressed and being weighed down by all those things, they can get a lot more done. They can be in the space to be creative. And so what I'm wondering is I would also like to just put this out here, is if we can start to quantify some of those things, what's the negative impact that's happening because of the depression, because of the anxiety, because of all these things that are plaguing so much of especially the younger generation? How can we can get more businesses involved in wanting to invest in some of these strategies, in some of these awesome things that you're offering, and in teaching people how to use these strategies in their companies. And so I'm wondering what are your thoughts, and what have you found on that, and companies' willingness to invest?
So in the area of connectedness, which I talked about, we talk a lot about the counter to connectedness, which is loneliness. And you heard some comments on loneliness. We've got a number of white papers that we've assembled, cross functional research studies, et cetera, that I'd love to share with you. You can show, obviously you cannot show causality, but you can show clear straight line correlation between loneliness and its adverse effect on primary KPIs like productivity, engagement, turnover, et cetera. So if that's what you're looking for, please reach out and I'll be glad to share that.
Maybe a comment on the way down. This is huge. If you read any business publication right now, it'll talk about 2 or 3 buzzwords. One of them is burnout, right? It's enormous right now. And so, yeah, it's significant. You know, productivity it does go down. People leave. You know, I mean, it's enormous. So, you know, Levo, you know, we have a line of mental health professionals who just do what we call organizational therapy. In my opinion, this is just me, private business is likely going to solve this challenge quicker, faster, stronger than most nonprofit. Not that they can't, but until the resources come behind the nonprofits, until private business really gets on board with Promise to Live, just my opinion, it's still going to be grassroots instead of major swelling of resource. So organizational therapy, therapists, professionals going to organizations and on a group scale doing and teaching coping and the tolerance, spectrum, all of those things are key issues. So there's a lot of big vision, people out there who are trying to drive mental health education and knowledge at the business level. It's a huge focus.
I think that was one of the reasons that Clint Betts was, when I asked him about getting on with Silicon Slopes, he said, fantastic, because we need to be talking about this. And I think businesses probably have a dual investment. On the one hand, it's important for them to be interested in productivity and improving the bottom line. But on the other hand, showing an interest in their employees and saying, you know what, our business, Business X, is a place that is sensitive to mental health issues. This is a place where you can come work and where you can feel understood. And if you have struggles, we are trained to know how to deal with that. We like that. So I hope that is the future of business, is better understanding that and then using some of the tools that are out there available.
If you read the latest CDC report, latest meeting in 2022, so it's getting old now, but you will, there is and go ahead, it's pretty long, but it does address the loss of productivity in the workplace as a result of the trauma that employees go to work with every single day. Loss of productivity, loss of days of work, illnesses, and the cost associated with that is quite fascinating. And yes, I do agree. The business community that is represented in here should become extremely aware of this problem and provide the services and not just fire people because they just came to work traumatized, trying to cope with their issues.
Okay, I think we have time for 2 more questions. We had one in the back earlier. Is there one over? Okay, so we'll spread it, and then I don't want to go over our time block. So.
Hi, I'm Jamie. I have been working in startups, hard growth startups, for 15 years. I'm going to try not to cry. With founders who have committed suicide, both in Vegas Tech and Seattle. My question today, though, as it's very personal, I've been up here since March of last year when my youngest brother took a tumble on his mountain bike and broke his C4. He was working for Bill.com as an engineer, and we have adjusted to a transition that has not only impacted his mental health, but obviously his physical, and that recovery journey is very long. So my question for Silicon Slopes is, what resources would you guys recommend here in Salt Lake City area for somebody who's transitioning dramatically? And my parents, my older sister and I have been nonstop working on getting resources and working on other people who have gone through a spinal cord injury and how that impacts. But also right now we're hitting a really big plateau with his mental health. And what resources would you recommend for someone like that who's 26 and life changed? For all of us.
My wife meets with individuals regularly at Levo who have brain injuries, major injuries. It's significant. I mentioned mine. When I went from ski racer guy to who am I now, the loss of identity is enormous on one's mental health. And as adults, we constantly have to kind of recreate who we are. We change careers, we do whatever, right? We've built the ability to kind of do those things to a degree, but even more so in youth. If your brother was a mountain biker, that's what I do. You know, and if someone took that away from me today, I'm just telling you, I would not be the same individual. If I can't go ride in the sun and have that serotonin, my mental health sucks in one day. So it is hard, you know, but there are resources. There are therapists, there are other professionals who specialize in those kinds of things, who have a background of working with, especially with athletes. Because that's really what it is, right? An identity and loss. It's a mourning, literally. It's a mourning loss of who I was and what I love. That's challenging.
Can I give you 2 minutes of free therapy for your brother? Okay. It just takes time. You talk about a plateau, and those things are going to happen. We kind of think, okay, well, he's going to start getting better, and it's going to be this continual upward trajectory, and there's never going to be any ebbs or flows, and then all of a sudden we hit a plateau, and we think, well, I must be doing something wrong, because I'm not getting better. Where's more resources? Where's, you know, what am I not accessing that's helping me get better? It just takes time. And so I think if he can make that, just that cognitive shift and just say, you know what, I am going to get better. I am going to feel differently someday. Right now, this is not one of those days. One of these days is on that plateau, and I'm going to go even or maybe even a little bit lower. But as long as he maintains that hope, then he will go upward again. So just, you know, like the stock market, it goes like this over 50 years, but it goes like this, right? So just tell him to hang in there.
And I think to add to what they said, those are great resources. There's a lot of resources. 211 is a resource. I know that's not amazing, just to say, oh, call 211 and see what you can find. But I didn't know when I almost lost my child about NAMI, about AFSP. So NAMI, NAMI.org, AFSP.org, JED, Trevor, Live On. All of these you can find on my website. That was the problem, and that's part of the reason I have set this up, is because somebody's telling me to go here, to go here, to go here, to go here. And when you're in crisis and pain, you need resources at your fingertips that are tried and true. So we put all those on our resources tab, and that's what we want to continue to build is, if you need help with spirituality or connecting to a higher power, we want you to know about Skylight. It's a fantastic tool that does no good if you don't know it exists. So our goal is to put everything there and to find these resources and kind of put them in one place so that we do have access. So you can find those currently on our resources, and we will be building those out as we go. Yes?
Okay. Hi, I'm Chris Nelson. I am an IT and a cybersecurity leader, and I've been unemployed for the last a little over 6 months now. I'm actually very involved in the job search group here in Utah. There's a part of the church. There's a couple of other groups that I'm a part of, and we have been adding motivation and mental health to part of what keeps people motivated. Searching for a job is a marathon. It's not a sprint, and we have that kind of conversation a lot. What really spoke to me about what Richard was talking about of hope is what really puts to motivation. Without that hope, it's really hard to stay motivated. That's something that we've been working on a lot. With other high performers that are also out of work, we've put together a couple of programs to really build accountability groups and help one another stay motivated. On top of that, I have a 17-year-old Zoomer who's one of his friends committed suicide a year ago, and there's been a lot of discussion around hope and what motivates you. So I really appreciate what this group is doing. My question is about the job seekers, because that's big to me. I'd love to connect to any of you if you know any potential positions in IT and cybersecurity, by the way. But what can Silicon Slopes do for the job seekers out there? It's a tough market, and I'm sure you all see it.
Go ahead.
Good question. And I'm not, I guess I'm the only person formally representing Silicon Slopes. I don't know the answer to that question. But connect with me. Can I help you find the answer? Okay. Let's talk afterwards, and let me get your contact information and see what we can do.
And I have just one quick thought on that. I'm no expert, but here's what I do know. You guys are here because of connection. You guys are here because you saw something that one of us posted or did, or you know us. We're here because we're a community of connectors. Nate Randall spoke last time at Gab. Did you see what he did for that lady, posting her and her job search? We have the ability every day to help. All you have to want is you just have to have the want to do that. So how can we help you? I don't know, we're a community. We lift each other, we build each other, that's what we do. Final question.
Okay, so this is just really quick. As I've been here, I know Brandy a little bit. I do work for a nonprofit called Stand for Kind, and we have an app that we've developed that, as I'm listening to everyone, I'm just thinking, so it's bringing all the resources together for businesses to have access to all of the resources that these guys are talking about just at their fingertips. So it has to do with all the mental health resources. It has to do with leadership and all the trainings, and we even have a place to post your job openings. We have a place so college students can go in there and check it out, and then anyone else can as well. And so we're trying to give that. As I'm listening to you guys, I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is so perfect. I'd love to present about this at some point here.
Well, we had Pam here last time.
Yeah, and she didn't talk about the app because
Right.
but it is truly something. As I present to businesses, I cannot get around to people fast enough. So it is something that we do have access to, and we are trying to provide because we understand how important it is in the workforce to have all of the mental health tools and resources that we do for our schools. We currently do that for our schools and help our kids. Some amazing things about teachers and their power there. It's so amazing. So anyway, that's it. Sorry, I didn't want to take too much time. Yeah, number 4, Stand for Kind. I actually have some cards. If you guys want to hear some more, you can come chat with me. But anyway, didn't want to take too much time. Thanks, Brandy.
No, thank you for that. And thank you to our panelists. Appreciate that. Give them another round of applause. I want to thank each of you for coming. This is why we're doing it. We need to know about the resources. We need to know about the tools. We need to connect as a community. We need to build as a group. We need to lift where we are. Rising waters lifts all ships. We need to lift each other now more than ever in any time. And it's not a one-size-fits-all, but we do plan on addressing it: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, social. And the way that we're going to be moving forward with some of these, and we'll be discussing with Dr. Morgan and with Silicon Slopes and our team, but what we have planned is each month, the 3rd Thursday, mark your calendar of the month, we will do these from noon to 2 like we're doing, and we'll focus on mental next time. And we'll dive in with a few experts to really address that. And then the following month, we'll do physical. And each month we'll take one of these and we'll dive down a little bit, and we'll talk about depression and anxiety and women's groups and parenting. We can dial these down to provide resources for you. And while we're doing that, if you guys have resources, please reach out to me. This is my contact information. My goal is not to reinvent any wheels. I'm the train conductor and we're the engine, and I want to get you on track, and I want to put your resources on track, and I want to get the people on board, and we want to chug on down the track and share it with everybody. That's our goal. No ego, impact. How do we unite as a community, as parents, as professionals, to save lives? This is urgent. You are needed. You are loved. Cynthia said last time, before we ended, she said, well, what's the call to action? What am I supposed to do now? So I have a call to action for each of you. First and foremost, if you have not, will you promise to live? Will you promise to be here? Can you each look at me right now, look me in the eyes, and just say, I promise to live? Do it with me. I promise to live. I promise to live. That's a big part. Take it off the table. Now, your orders, marching orders, I was not a drill sergeant, but I played one on TV. Ask your loved ones. Go home today. Ask the people closest to you. Are you suicidal? Are you okay? Honest questions, get honest answers. You will not plant the idea. You will open the conversation for real love and support and genuine connection. Ask them that, and then look them in the eye and say, will you promise me that you're going to live? Will you promise me that if you're struggling, you'll reach out to someone, whether it be me, a friend, a family member, 988, a trusted resource like Live On, NAMI, doctors, whatever it is, just make the promise. We need you. Take it off the table. Your wife, your kids, your children, you're needed. It's never better without you. So make the promise and look at the people you love and the people you work with and get them to promise you, because when we don't love ourselves enough, we might love you enough. And when you make a promise ahead of time, you're at least 60% more likely to keep it. And gosh darn it, we need you. Thank you for coming.